Welcome everyone to our product support session. Again, we're trying to do these sort of once a month or so. I think we've sort of now settled in about mid-month. We were doing start of the month before, but I think mid-month-ish, but we might start alternating the Thursday, Wednesday sort of thing, just depending on people's days and when they're free. But yeah, today's session, we're going to sort of follow on a little bit more from the one we did last time, which was to do with variables. We're going to do a little bit more with variables that seem to be of interest to everyone. Everyone wants to sort of learn a bit more about those, so happy to look into those a little bit further as well. The session is being recorded. We've got links to the old ones as well. We're still working on getting those set up in a sort of a repository, hopefully by the next session for sure, if not sooner. We'll have those up and ready for people to be able to go back and check previous ones as well. But obviously, still come on and join us and join the session. So let's kick off from there. Okay, so again, we're looking a little bit further in variables, more sort of in practice and what we can use them for within Lectora, and some actual sort of interactions and actual setups and how they can be used as well. So specifically, I wanted to have a little closer look at modifying variables and the different ways you can manipulate them. We'll do those in a few different ways as well, but I've sort of set up one particular demo that does a lot of those. We also had some stuff, I think last session, people talked about sort of resetting or retrying a quiz. There's some sort of variables and conditions involved with that, with a sort of method that we're using. I'll show how that all works as well. And also on sort of quiz attempts, and just in general setting up a variable to sort of count things throughout the course as a counter for something that Lectora is not already counting. There's lots of things that Lectora already keeps track of for you, but sometimes you want to manually track those things. And of course you can restrict navigation and set up different sort of branching options based on those conditions as well. Okay, so really quick recap just in general on variables, and a little picture back up there again. We like to think of variables as sort of containers or jars, as I've got on the screen there, that are labeled and holding different information. So information the user puts into the course or information about things that are happening. Those are all sort of tracked, and they can be either modified or used to sort of trigger things as well on future pages as you go through. So in general, it's for storing data as you go through the course, so anything that's happened during the course. You can also retain variables, so if a user leaves and returns to the course, things like tracking attempts or tracking whether or not they've done an interaction, you obviously want things like that to be retained so people aren't having to redo things so often. Variables can be changed based on user actions specifically as well, so users clicking a button, answering a question. We can obviously manipulate things based on that as well. And there are the two main types there. So user-defined variables are the ones we add ourselves to track things. And again, usually sort of keeping those to tracking things in Lectora that aren't already being tracked by built-in variables, which are either things Lectora is already tracking as it goes, or they're tied to a certain object. For example, setting up a question, the question has a variable tied to it already. So that's a built-in variable in Lectora as well. Okay, feel free to throw any questions in the chat as well, or you can pop your hand up and we can go through from there. But a little bit more on just data types, because we'll have a little closer look at that today as well. We can use variables to store numbers and track things, counters or scores. You can also use it to track text, or what they call a string, so a combination of letters and numbers. People typing answers in, or true and false, that type of stuff as well. There's also specifically the sort of yes or no, true or false type flag option that people use as well. But any variable in Lectora can do all of these things. You don't have to set it as a number variable or a text variable or anything like that. It'll just do whatever's based on the values that are in there already as well. So that's a bit of stuff that we already sort of looked at from last week, but a bit of a recap. And from there, we'll jump into sort of this first setup. So in order to show a better way of how Lectora sort of manipulates variables and how you can modify the values, we used to run our sort of training, which people have been around for a while might have done the dog training with Lectora. There used to be a page that we did in that did a calculation. So it took input from the user, taking numbers, and it would multiply, divide, it would do basically a formula, and then output input some information based on that as well. I've done a sort of version of that that's a little bit more relevant than the dog weight or whatever it was in the training as well, but just showing you how you can modify variables using those numbers and sort of keep track of something as it goes through. So these can be used for pretty sort of interesting interactions depending on what type of thing you might be doing as well, and it just shows how the variable can be manipulated throughout the course. Something important to note there as well is if the variable only contains numbers, you can use things like multiply, divide, all that sort of stuff will work, and actually sort of calculate that. If there's any letters in there, it treats the whole thing as text as a string, even if there's also numbers. So it obviously can't sort of divide by a, things like that. So it simply just won't do that if that's the case. That's just something important to note if you're doing a counter or something you're trying to count up. You want to make sure you're not doing that in a variable. It's also storing text or letters as well. And we can go from there. So moving over here, a bit of a demo. Like I said, what I'm going to do in this demo is pull in some data from the user from a few different ways. I've already got this set up. I'll just go through what's sort of set up in there. And it's going to run some calculations and do some math on that, which I'll sort of briefly explain as it goes step by step. And then it displays the results of that calculation as well. So let's jump over to our course here, which again, I've used one of the themes and sort of structures within Lectora to quickly sort of get something set up. We've got a quiz later that we'll have a look at. And firstly, we're going to jump into this one, which is going to work out how to calculate monthly repayments and interest and all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit more relevant than a dog training type deal as well. I don't know if it's the full formula. I'm not doing compound interest because that's a little bit more complicated, but just to show an example of how this can work as well. So the main parts here that we're doing in this demo is taking some information from the user. So they can type in a loan amount, so some sort of number, whatever the amount would be, and also decide how many sort of months that's being repaid over. They can type all that in, and you can also choose an interest rate, which I've done a bit of a range there, which we'll see in a second when we do a demo. So Lectora is taking all that information and sort of combining it together to do that sort of formula and work out the monthly repayment that they're going to need at the end as well. So I'll just preview that and do the demo first, and then I'll explain the actions and everything that it's doing in the background. So I'll just throw in some, you can see all my testing there in the cookies. Throw in some sort of amount here, say 120,000, not too bad of a loan for that. And the interest rate I've just got in percent, so from 5 to 10. So let's say it's 5%. If we hit calculate, it's going to do all this stuff in the background, and it's basically going to say not a very good repayment, but it's not a very good loan either. And it just explains how much interest there is added on and what the monthly repayment will be. So all of that's done in the background with actions, with variables, and it's calculating that all together. So you could set up obviously a much more complicated one as long as you're happy to sort of set up the actions and the triggers for that as well. So let's go through what's actually happening. First of all, these two, we did one last time entering in a user's name. These two elements are entry fields. So that's a way for users to type in data and you can then pull that out. So there's a variable tied to that as well. If we go to the properties tab, you can see what the variable is tied to, which is, again, we've got that sort of, there's no spaces in variable names. So you'll often see that either no space or a, underscore there. I always put underscores at the start because that puts all of my user-defined variables at the top of every list, so I don't have to go looking through all the way down the bottom, even though it's alphabetical. There's a lot of pre-used variables in Lectora, so you want to sort of be able to grab yours quite quickly. Something I haven't specifically done on this, but I'll turn on now as well, is when you do an entry field, you have the option to set a couple more behaviors to do with that. So you can set a max character limit, for example. You can have it so it's multi-line, which means they can keep typing further down. If you have it as a password, it'll actually do the little sort of stars when you type it in. So if you want sort of secret data, it'll still input the variable as it's meant to be, but Lectora is going to display that as stars or asterisks. And you can also set it so it'll only allow numbers. And this comes back to that sort of making sure there's numbers versus letters within the variable value. So you obviously have to account for users just doing whatever they want. They might want to do sort of like a check style and type in $100,000 in words. It's not going to be able to calculate anything with that. So we can actually limit that so only numbers are allowed in here. And what that does is simply just won't input any letters when they type, so only numbers allowed. We probably do the same thing for the months. and set that to numbers only. That's just a quick one to check with any of these type of things, just to account for people doing the wrong thing as well. The interest rate is just a drop-down list item, which you can find in the test and survey here. So drop-down list, that allows you to just add a series of values, whatever they'll be, and it ties that back to that variable as well. So I've got interest rate there is my variable, and these are just simply numbers, so you can basically add new values whenever you want, type them in, and the same goes for things like questions. If you're doing a drop-down list, you can choose what those are, and it's just going to input that value. Those are good as well if you're wanting sort of input data from a user, but you're not just allowing them to freely type it in. Of course, you want to have sort of a range or specific options. That's handy for that as well. So the interest rate, we don't want sort of a bit too many variables for people to, or variations on what people can type in. So you want to sort of control that a little more as well. So once it's got all those numbers, it's going to do a long sort of series of actions and start to calculate this. And the main thing we're doing here is the modify variable action, which is the main thing I'm trying to show here as well. So I've got this button that does a series of actions here. An important thing with this as well is, especially when you're doing things like calculations or something like that, modifying variables, is the order of the actions matters. So it always goes from the top down. So obviously, if we did any of these in a different order, it's just going to go all crazy. So you want to sort of make sure you're tracking the variable as it goes. If you wanted to test this as you went as well, you can use the debug mode and watch the variable value change. You can also do the sort of tracking of the actual variable itself on the screen, so you can see as it changes. But essentially, there's a couple of different steps that we're doing here. Starting off with grabbing that interest rate. So at the moment, there's just a number, 5 to 10. We're basically making a new variable to turn that into a decimal. So the decimal variable's there. That's starting off being just set to whatever that entry field or whatever that drop-down list is set to. So if I set it to 5, it's going to start this value at 5. And then to get the percentage to do the actual calculation, it's going to take that current value, which is that decimal, and divide that by 100 to get to the percent as well. We could have just put the actual sort of percentage in there, but it looks a bit funny having sort of 0.05 or whatever you're doing in there as well for users. So it's just an extra step to be able to get that access to that as well. So now we've got both those variables to work with. We also need to get the base repayment, which is just the loan divided by the months. So there's a new variable there called base repayment, which is just going to be starting off equal to whatever they've typed in that first box. And then that second action after that is just dividing that by whatever they've typed in the second box. So it's grabbing those pretty easily. All this stuff is grabbed from the user's data as well. So from there, we also grab the monthly interest, which is another variable on its own, and that's equal to firstly the full loan amount, and dividing that or multiplying that by the interest rate as well, which was where we got the decimal from. So it's basically getting all these sort of parts of this information into one place, which we can then do those calculations as well. Obviously, the monthly interest then also needs to come down by month, which again, it's dividing that by whatever number they've put in there as well. So these are obviously only as complicated or as simple as you make it. I think the dog weight one was much more simple, but you can do any sort of formula or calculation based on this sort of stuff as well. There's a few different sort of elements to this one, so it's a bit more complex. But we've now got a base interest or base repayment, and we've got a monthly interest. So the monthly repayment's just adding those two together, which is starting off with its own variable again. We're going to set that equal to the base repayment, whatever that amount is. And this time it's doing the add variable, so it's adding the value from the monthly interest, so just adding those two together. So these modify variable actions have a number of different options. As I said, you can add, you can subtract, you've got multiply, divide, you can even round up and down, which probably do in this case for some of these as well. And anything that would apply to numbers will actually do the calculation. If you've got letters in there, it will still do an add or a subtract, but it just works a little bit differently. So adding text will just simply add it onto the string, which can be helpful in other methods as well. Depending on what you're doing, you can add words together or add into a list of some kind. Subtract is a bit weird because it'll actually find anywhere where it's matching that value you've pulled in, and it'll just pull it out. So I think I've done that in a couple of places where it was a very weird interaction, but good to know how that works. It simply just won't do multiply, divide, round, any of those if there's letters in there. It'll just ignore that and skip to the next action as well. But that allows you to sort of do those calculations as well. The other one we're using mainly here is the set equal to. So that's just matching one variable to another. So you're storing that information into another sort of bucket or another jar to then modify that as well. At the end of that, we've now got the monthly repayment as a number. We've got the monthly interest as a number. So the very last action we're doing down the bottom here is actually updating a text block, which is sitting underneath this button. So we've got this little blank text box here. This is one we use quite often if you're showing sort of results or displaying some sort of information or text. It's important in this case as well to have something written in here. So at the moment it looks blank, but it's because I've just got a simple space in there. So if you have nothing in there, it'll sort of come up funny when you're trying to add details in there. It needs that space in there to work through that. But essentially this last action is a change contents, which can be used to change text into some other text. It can also be used on images to change one image to another, which you can do that as well. There's actually a few different options depending on what you're targeting here. And the value here, we're just setting this text, which we draw in this little box, which we can then use a combination of the just normal text we're typing, as well as that VAR sort of format where it's pulling in whatever information we've got here. So that's where it just says your monthly repayment will be whatever the value of that variable was per month, and just to note how much the interest is as well, which is the other variable. So we could display any of those variables we just created if you wanted to show the full sort of setup. So here was your base, here's your interest, here's your other stuff as well. Because we've got that information, we can display it pretty easily as well. So you could even do it out in a little sort of a table or something and display those, but we just popped it into a bit of a text block. And so all of that happens when we click that button, and it does it in that order. So it does all that maths, and then it actually adds to the text block. And that's how we get the information that we got. In another one, a 30-year loan for $1 million. You can pop it in there as well. Here's where you'd probably want to look at the rounding option, which you can also do as well. We can round that up and it'll have some values there as well, but essentially we can pop that in as well. So definitely don't want to be paying that much interest per month, but that's essentially setting that up as well. So obviously that's a very specific setup, very specific sort of technique as well, but it's showing how you can grab this information from variables and manipulate them as well. So the calculation there is the key thing. So if you are trying to make any more specific interactions where you need to calculate stuff, you can either be putting your own information in. So I could have simply set a repayment month period or set an interest rate instead of allowing that to be a variable option, and that just skips a step of me having to sort of pull that data from the user. But essentially that's how we can play around with those variables in different ways. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. It's probably pretty complicated, but it's something you can sort of work with the variables a little bit more as well. How's everyone with that? A lot of stuff to play around with. Okay, so that's that sort of variable, and we can actually share. With some of these, I might share these files as well afterwards if people want to sort of have a play or have a look at them. This one I've done in Lectora Online, so we could share that to people who are using that. But I can also create a file. That might be something we'll start to add in conjunction with doing these videos as well. If there's anything relevant, you can see the example that we've done and play around with it as well. Okay, so that's my monthly repayment calculator. Let's jump back over here and we'll go from here as well. Okay, so this one, just to do with quizzes in general, was, I think it was a request either last session or one of the 2 sessions last month, but essentially allowing us to edit or navigate through a quiz in different ways, depending on what you're wanting to do when you're resetting or retrying it as well. So the key thing to remember there is obviously Lectora automatically has a variable for each question, so it knows which questions are correct, unless you specifically reset the question, which is an action you can do, or reset the quiz, which will just reset all of them. It's going to hold on to that information even if you go back and forward as well. In this case, we're going to use some conditions as well to control what's happening, some control the options. So for example, the condition we'll use is if this question is correct, we can then do something as well. So this setup that we're doing is one that I've done a couple times with quizzes, allowing the user to go back through, and they're only going to see the questions that they got wrong So it just skips over the correct ones. And we also, in this case, use an else action, which I'll explain when we jump into Lectora as well. So when you're using conditions, you've always got your if and your else as well, which you can use. So jump over here. So specifically what we'll do in this one, what I'll show you is setting up basically an option at the end of the quiz to retry, and it goes back through. And then we have a couple of actions that we can apply on each question page that will do that skip option. So it's either going to skip the question if it's correct, or it's going to reset it if it's incorrect, so they can then try it again. And you can basically set how many times you want to do that, and the users keep going till they get them all correct, that sort of setup. Or if they have a certain amount of attempts, we'll look at that as the next demo as well, that's already set up in here, but I'll show that in a second. Okay, so let's jump back over to Lectora again. And we'll have a look at our quiz. So it's quite a simple quiz. I've just done some basic, pretty much just, multiple choice over and over here. I'll show you the actions on those pages in a second, but further down here, what we want to do here is on the fail page is where we're going to retry. So they get here, it shows their score, shows shows the passing score, shows what score they got. It shows the attempts, which we'll have a look at in a minute. And then you can hit retry, which in this case, the retry simply goes back to the quiz intro. So it's just a navigation. So we go back to the quiz intro, we begin our test, and we jump in here. Each question, again, it's just a simple multiple choice. Lectora knows when it's correct. Something important to check when you're doing this sort of setup is that you know what your question variables are. So whenever you have a question selected, if you go to the properties tab, you can see its variable sitting underneath here. So back in the day, I think Lectora would just start that as it's like 001 or something, and then it would just keep counting through every time you add 2 questions. In Lectora Online, it adds like a big crazy number at the end instead. I always like to sort of bring those back so I know which is which. So I've edited these to specifically be sort of question 1, 2, 3, whatever we're doing there. And that just makes it easier to pick them from a list as you go through. When you're talking with doing actions to do with whether a question's correct, it's using the variable, and the variable can be accessed among different pages. Whereas if you're checking to see something that specifically happened on that page, you'll only have access to that page. So if I wanted to reset the question, which we'll do in a second, it only shows me the question on this page. So I don't need to know what it's called for that purpose, but to reset it from the other side, we do need to know. So each of these are the same. They have a submit button, which just processes the test question as they go through. And it's this action at the top, which is doing all the work here. So grabbing this one, this is at the top of the page, so it's triggered on show, meaning that when the page first loads, that's when that appears. So it triggers that as soon as they enter the page, basically. And the action it's doing here is just go to the next page, obviously on a condition. And when we preview in this, which I'll show in a second, you do see that page flash for a second before it skips. When you're actually doing it in runtime, you don't really see that. It sort of goes so quickly, it may flash for a second as white, but it won't actually load the page. So that's how we get that sort of skip setup option. The condition here that we're using, if I pop this open, is again the question variable. So this is where it's sort of important for me to know the numbers. If I pop down the list here, it just pops them in order for me. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if these were all crazy numbers, I'd need to know which one was which and keep double checking. Essentially, it's just saying, is this question correct? So one of the options we have for this condition here, when it's a question variable, is talking about it being correct, incorrect, all that sort of stuff, versus having it whether it contains a value or if it's equal to something as well. So if this question's correct, it's going to skip the page. So it leaves it correct, it doesn't reset, it keeps that saved, and it goes to the next page automatically. Now, whenever you set a condition in Lectora, it then activates this sort of what's called the else action. So if you leave that blank, it just means it's either going to do this or do nothing. In this case, we want it to either do this or do something else, which is where that else action comes in. In this case, we just want it to reset the question. So if they come back through and that was an incorrect question, it just empties it back out for them to reselect and choose a new option. So to them, they just see questions pop up again as normal, and they answer them again. And this is where the target is going to only show me one that's available. So it's only showing me the question that's on this page, because that's all it can reset. You can only reset a question from the page it's on, unless you're resetting the entire quiz. So that's basically going to do that. So each page it hits, it's going to check if it's right or wrong. If it's right, we go to the next one. If it's wrong, it resets and they do it again. the important part here with the reset as well, I've actually set attempts on these questions. So we'll talk about quiz attempts in a second, which is a separate thing. Lectora doesn't automatically track quiz attempts, so that's something we have to set up ourselves, which I'll show you shortly. But it does track attempts for a question itself. So if I select my actual question object and go up here to properties, you can see you have your question options, you have your feedback, which you can enable. Then you also have attempt. So this is usually either on or off. I pop this open. When you tick this on, it sets maximum attempts and you set a number there. So basically whatever number you set here is how many times they're going to try before it locks the question down. It'll grey it out and they can't actually edit it. And you also pick when it actually counts the attempt. So this is often the same way you'd select your feedback if you want it to track an attempt based on them actually hitting submit versus it being based on as soon as they select an answer. So for attempts, it's usually better to have some sort of process option. Otherwise, if they're clicking through randomly, it's going to track each of those clicks as an attempt. So this will basically only allow them one go at each thing before it locks it out, right or wrong. As soon as they click submit on that option, it locks in their answer. You can also choose to have certain feedback come up for each question when they've hit their attempts. I've left that off in this case, but that allows us to control that as well. So what that means is when I'm previewing this course, choose my answers, I can make my choice, whatever it is. Once I'm happy with it and I hit submit, it'll give me my feedback, which I had set up. It says it's wrong. It now no longer lets me edit this as well. So when we're going back through, that's why it's going to reset. If it's correct, it'll leave it and it'll leave it locked. If it's incorrect, it resets for you to try it again. And you can probably basically repeat that as much as you want. So they have no other option on this page now except to go to the next page as well. And that's basically all you need to do on each page. You can essentially copy and paste this action onto every page. The only thing you need to do is double check you've set this condition to the correct variable. So you just got to double check you're changing that one. If you're doing this in a template, you could basically set up this first question, set up the action, and then copy and paste the page itself. Obviously, you may need to change the question, so that may not always work. But if you copy and paste the page, it will update the variable to the new page question as well. So you don't need to repeat that. So just a little bit of a time saver there. That's what I did in this example, is I just had two question options and I copy and pasted them. So this part updates automatically because it can only target the question that's on the page. And this part will obviously change if you've copied it, but otherwise you just got to double check this is all set correctly. And so, yeah, it's just an action on the top of each page. And I'll show you what it looks like quickly here as well. And then we'll talk about some attempts and other options as well. Go here, begin. I get them, some of them wrong, some of them right to start with. I can't get too many right, or it'll pass me and then I won't get to show you the attempts. I'll just get one right for now. So one of those was right. Get through here. Let's do two correct. Okay. Takes me to my page. I submit my quiz now. You can do that on the final page if you want. I've just got that as a separate page just to keep that separate. Finish the test. My score hasn't updated properly. I'll double check that, but it's tracked my attempts there. So if I go back through and retry, begin the test. This one's open, so let's get that one right this time. Click next. You'll see it skipped it for a second, but in preview, there's always a bit more sort of delay on those sort of interactions. So in a live HTML or in the SCORM, you usually won't notice that at all. It'll just click, unless it goes through like 10 of them at once, maybe you'll see a flicker for a second. But we've done that sort of setup for a lot of different quizzes as well. So submit that one. I'll have to double check my score. Something's going on there. I'll make sure I'm not getting too many right. Okay, finish test. Nah, pass that time. Damn, I can't show you the reset. I'll show you that on the next one. So that basically you can continue to sort of repeat that as well. So for a bigger quiz, obviously that will come through a bit more. You'll only see the sections that they're doing. If you've broken it down into quiz chapters or something as well, you could do a similar thing where it'll skip through them so that they're not actually going to access those. So basing it on them having already completed them. You could also do the same thing if you're trying to do like a pre-test where maybe an entire section is passed already. You could either just completely skip that part so they don't see it, which could be branching navigation or something, or it'll just skip through those and have them already marked off using that variable, which you can play around with as well. So that's just a different way of doing that. And as far as setting it up on each question, that's all we really need to do for that sort of setup. So it's either skip or reset is the main thing there that we can look at. Now, I mentioned I've got that last sort of quiz page here, which is where I actually submit the test. It's quite often that you have instead the final question page, instead of having a next button, it'll have a button that submits the test as well. The only thing you need to do there if you are doing it that way is making sure that this action you've set up matches whatever's meant to happen on that page. So in that case, I would have this, instead of being next page, you can actually have this submit the test. So if that one was correct already, it submits it from that point, so they don't have to do it again. That's just something you need to sort of make sure. So whatever navigation was meant to happen on that page is what's going to happen on this action instead. And you can fix that up pretty easily. So that, yeah, that's a quick little setup we've done in a few courses for a few people as well. And hopefully that's helpful with the with tracking the variables of the questions and all that sort of stuff as well as you go through. Let me go.
Will, just a quick question there about what you've showed, which is awesome. I'm curious to understand how that would, or whether there's any impacts or considerations for people to consider if you might be randomizing the assessment or the quiz, and you've got, maybe you're presenting 10 questions, but you've got a pool of say 20. Is there anything that you would need to consider in the approach you've just shown, as far as how that is managing a reset in that scenario that you would call out?
Yeah, so because of the way Lectora actually works with randomizing questions, it'll handle the navigation part after you hit next page or whatever it is. So because those actions are happening on each page itself, that should still do exactly what it's meant to do. And the way Lectora works with the randomization, as I think you already know from playing around with it, is that in the same session that you're in, it's doing the same random order. So it's essentially setting a random order on that run through, and it'll continue to do that. So I believe resetting it completely, if you reset the whole quiz, it will reset the randomization. But essentially, if they got the questions 5, 3, 4, 2, 1, and then they go back through again, it's going to keep that order, even doing this skip setup that we're doing. So it'll sort of, it'll maintain that the way that it was already running. It's only if you do a full sort of quiz reset that it starts that randomization all over again. So yeah, essentially it should still work pretty much the same way as what we just showed there. And it's the only thing there is you wouldn't have to worry about the submit test option, because when it's randomized, it'll just automatically do that on the final question, no matter what question that is. Cool. It'll go from there.
Awesome, yeah, thank you.
So yeah, all good. Any other questions on that setup? Everyone's okay? I've got 2 pages of people now. I'm going to skip back and forward. All good. Okay, let's jump through this next part. So this sort of last one I'll go through quickly and show as well. You already saw a little bit of that, which something's gone wrong, I'll try and fix as we go. But tracking quiz attempts is another really, really common one used for variables, and it's a place where you would need to use your own variable. So it's something that Lectora itself definitely isn't doing, that you want to be able to control that as well. So in order to do this, we're going to set a counter. So a variable used as a counter, which again is pretty common usage of a variable, whether you're tracking quiz attempts or course attempts or how many times someone's done anything, you can track it as well. Something important to note there, which you could do one way or the other, and I'll explain which way I did it and why. You can count a counter up, or you can count it down. So it sort of seems obvious, but it does factor into what you're doing as well. And it's very important with a counter, specifically for things like attempts, is to control exactly where it's modifying that. So if you have it sort of say on a certain page, just when it shows that page, you want to make sure that's not a page that users are going to sort of be able to click back and forward from without actually doing the thing that's meant to be tracking the attempt. So if you had it on the intro page for the course, and they go back and forward from that, it's going to count each time it hits that, and they haven't actually done an attempt at that point. So you just got to manage exactly where and when that's doing that to account for people clicking all over the place and not doing what you expect them to do. So something to keep important there as well. As part of this as well, I'll also show sort of restricting navigation and also notifying the user when things have changed or when things are happening based on that counter and what's happening there as well. So jumping over here, really quickly, again, I've set this up already, so I'll show you, but we're going to set up a counter variable to track the attempts. We're going to modify that count whenever the user attempts their quiz, and also we're going to block the access, and notify the user when the attempts have run out. So don't let them back in the quiz again, which is the whole point of blocking it off. So we'll have a look at that here as well. Jump back into that one. So a couple of things here. I've got my variable already set up, which I'll actually show you up here in my variable manager. Pop it open. You can see all these sort of ones that I made for the other calculation. And then quiz attempts is the one we've got here. So something important to note I've set up in this one is that I'm counting down in this case, and I'll explain why. So you've set an initial value in this variable. Like I said, I think in the last session, when you make a variable, it'll usually just have the initial value as 0. Oftentimes, if I'm doing something like tracking an attempt on an interaction or tracking sort of clicking through things on the screen, which I showed last time, I tend to use letters for those, so the ABC sort of method rather than counting. And because of that, I set the initial value to empty. So there's not just having a 0 sitting there, even though in that interaction, it doesn't actually stop anything from happening. When you're using a counter, you've got to sort of make sure you know where that's counting from. Obviously, if you're counting up, you may start at 0 for whatever reason. If you're counting down, obviously, you're setting sort of an upper limit. In this case, I want 3 attempts on my quiz. So I've set the initial value to 3. And the reason why I'm counting down is that because of the way I've set this up, you could actually change how many attempts this has simply by changing this initial value. Everything else works exactly the same way. The way I've set everything up is simply when it gets to 0. So I could have 20 attempts if I want. I just need to set this initial value to 20 and it'll always work. So because I've done that, it's just a way for us to sort of edit that as well. So you can sort of fix that up. I'm retaining this value between sessions, of course, because obviously if they jump in and out, then they can just suddenly retry the quiz and there was no point blocking their attempts. So something like that. But other than that, it's quite simple where and when this happens. So let me fix this up as well. So on my quiz intro, we begin the test, goes to the next page. They run through their questions, which again, they have all that sort of setup we already went through. Each question has an attempt on it as well, which is separate from this as they go through. And we've set it up so that they go back and retry the questions. Now, on the last quiz page, they finish their quiz, it processes, and then that takes them either to the pass page or the fail page. So fail page is where we're doing everything here. When we get to the fail page, it's going to set the lesson status, which is just because it's gone through there. And below that, I'm setting my quiz attempts. So in this case, it's tracking a new attempt each time they reach the fail page. Now, I'm only tracking failed attempts because really there's no point tracking a past attempt if you need to. There's certain cases where you can get in trouble there where you've set a certain amount of attempts, but it's tracking it on the pass as well. And then maybe they get to pass on the 3rd attempt, but it's tracking it as having used all the attempts, and depending on what you've set up, that may break something. In this case, it's just very simply every time they fail, they've used an attempt, and that just happens as soon as they reach this page. So to do that, I've made sure there's no other way they can get to this page except from going through the quiz and failing it. So again, it's not going to accidentally count that twice for whatever reason. It's not going to mess anything up there. It's just going to set that tracking attempts up, and then it's going to go to the quiz. Now, this is where we're starting to use some of the conditions on this as well. So when they retry their quiz, it just goes to the quiz intro, but there is an if to that. So it only goes to the quiz intro if my attempts is greater than 0. So basically, if they've still got attempts left, it'll go and retry again. I've also set it up to actually display the quiz attempts, which I showed there. Which I've just noticed I've got triple T's in there, so I'll fix that up. That only bothers me, doesn't affect anyone else. So as it goes through the quiz, it'll sort of add that on. If they've already met all their attempts here, so again, if it's greater than 0, it goes through the next page. If it is 0, which is the only other option or case there because of the way I've set it up, it'll just display a message saying you've exhausted all your attempts. So they can't do anything else from there. They have to just close the course. You could add a bit more information to that as well. I've just used the simple sort of display messages, which is just that generic pop-up. But of course, you could set up your own pop-ups to do that if you want to as well. So you can style it yourself and have a bit more control over how it looks. We can basically have that pop up there as well. Now, to stop them just retrying this over and over, I've actually got back here in the intro, my begin test option goes to my test. But again, it's only doing that if I have attempts left. So if my attempts is greater than 0, it'll go through and start the quiz. If not, it'll again just pop up and say you've exhausted all your attempts. There's no way they can get back in, try and do it sneaky, restart the quiz, or go right back to the start. There's nothing else in this quiz I've set up navigation-wise that could get them back there anyway. But in this case, if they close the course and restart it and go back in, it'll remember that they've used all their attempts and it's blocked them at that point. So you're sort of blocking it from both sides. There's no way in or out from either side, and it hits that condition no matter what they do there as well. Important to note as well on this modify action, which let me just change that to set attempts. On this action as well, it's also got a condition here, which is where we're controlling that count, which again, is very simple. If it's more than 0, subtract 1. If you don't do a condition on that, you'll then start hitting negative numbers and it'll sort of play around with that. Same way if you're counting up, if you don't add an upper limit, it's just going to keep counting as long as they hit that trigger again. So different ways of doing that. But again, I've used the count down so that we can actually vary the amount of attempts very easily by just editing the variable, and you can sort of adjust that pretty quickly as well. So this setup works for any amount of attempts, no matter what we're doing, what we're setting up as well. And it's also obviously good to display that for the user there as well. Now, I think my test score stopped working because I changed my quiz name, just to sort of troubleshoot in there. I'm going to manually fix that as we go. Quiz score should be the name. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Setting up that sort of attempt option sometimes can seem really complicated, and again, it mostly happens if you're not sort of tracking exactly where that happens. I've had often cases where you do it from the intro and it tracks it there, and then for example, maybe the user clicks back from here. So suddenly they're back here again, they click it again, they've done 2 attempts suddenly without having to actually do it. Obviously you can have it set up in your quiz so that they can't go back, and you can control that as well. There's different ways of setting things like that up depending on what you're wanting to do, but always just sort of, yeah, keeping track of variables and knowing exactly when and how they can be modified is the main thing when you're setting these things up, and they're the only things you sort of run into trouble with, as long as you have that sort of logic figured out as well as far as attempts go. And you could do this for anything. If you've got multiple quizzes throughout the course, maybe you can have that same sort of condition based on if they've had a certain amount of attempts to a certain section, they then have to do that section in the quiz. That sort of stuff like RPL is all controlled by how many times they've done something, or if they've passed that section as well. So same sort of thing. It's more using the conditions maybe than the variables, but understanding the variables is a key part, especially for things like a counter or a thing like that as well. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense with the counting stuff as well. So let me jump back over here. Yeah, Richard, do you have a question?
No, I just I guess an experience that I wanted to share. So quite often I'll be building courses that have an annual refresher, and you use last year's data to be able to guide your review process to see where people struck issues. So one of the things that was really valuable in the data that we obtained in our SCORM reporting before was the number of attempts that people had on a particular question. And if that had spikes compared to the other patterns that we saw for other questions, we knew that the question itself either was poorly worded or it didn't marry up with the content
for
itself.
evaluation.
Yeah, so that level of data through the SCORM information was really, really valuable. So getting a variable that tells you the number of attempts per question is a really useful thing that I've found for that review process.
Yeah, and that sort of stuff you can do. Obviously, a lot of things like that, the data you get depends on what the LMS can pull out, but you can also have things within the course to track things like that. If there's some way that maybe on the last screen or on their, I don't know, maybe not necessarily a good setup, but on their certificate or something within the course, it can show that information for you to then pull that out. It's often tricky to get that sort of data out if the SCORM course itself isn't already doing it. Something important to note as well, Lectora SCORM does do interaction data, which is pretty commonly not used in a lot of LMSs now, but if they are able to take that data, Lectora does track it, which includes answers that were selected for questions, maybe not certain attempts on the questions, but you may be able to also pull out variable information from that as well. I've used that to piggyback off a couple of things before where because it tracks interaction data for questions, you can save information back to a question variable, and then you can get that out in your data as well. So something like a quiz attempt option, if that's saved back to what Lectora actually counts as a question, you get that information in your interaction data. So that's something you can play around with. But a lot of that depends on the system you're using, the LMS, and what it actually can pull out as well. Of course, you can also do things like that if you're people starting to look into using XAPI instead of SCORM. You get a lot more of that data for that type of evaluation as well. You see how long people spend on certain pages, or how long they spend in the course, how many attempts they had at a question, or what their answers were. Sometimes obviously more important to see what the wrong answer was that everyone selected, not just that everyone got it wrong, because then there may be a gap in the learning, or the gap in the information, as you said. So yeah, lots of different ways to play around with that sort of stuff. A good comment there, Luke, as well with the RPL stuff. Yeah, locking in and out based on attempts and things like that. Obviously important for things like an RPL specifically. Don't want them to just retry that over and over again and skip the whole course. So good to track attempts, or at least block attempts on things like that as well. It's often easier to track something or block something if you're only letting them do it once, because you don't have to really track anything. It's just yes or no. Have they done it? No. Whereas if you're tracking a certain amount of things or a number, that's where we play around with the counters and things like that instead as well. Back to my presentation here. That was the last sort of little demo I was doing as well. I did sort of leave that open for questions, which we've kind of done a little bit there. I'll see if anyone else has any other questions. Otherwise, we were trying to do at the end of each of these sessions, have another quick look at Microbuilder every time, just in case anyone's missed it, just to show people what that looks like and what that does. So was there any other questions on the variable stuff and what we've looked at so far before we dive into that quickly? And anyone who's already seen Microbuilder, if you sort of want to finish up there, that's okay as well. But I'll be showing that off again. Or anything there to add, Michael? I think you're still there in the background. You've seen him pop up.
Yes,
there.
I'm still here. No, nothing to add from my side. That was really good, Will. That was awesome.
No, hopefully shedding some more light on these variables will get everyone doing some more complicated and fun stuff when you need to as well. Cool. So from there, I just wanted to have another quick look at Microbuilder and show that off as well. It's also good because they're updating it so often. Sometimes there's new stuff in the next week, so it could be something new in there a month later if you haven't seen it yet. So anyone who wants to stick around and have a look at that can. Otherwise, we can wrap up from there. So just acting as if nobody knows what this is at all. I think a lot of people have seen most of it already, but Microbuilder is our new sort of rapid authoring tool that we're sort of bundling in Lectora, and we're trying to get everyone access to and get everyone using it, because it is really, really handy and does a lot of good stuff. It's all online based, so it's all sort of triggered on there. Everything's saved online here, all your assets and stuff. It does also heavily use a lot of AI tools within it as well, which can be turned off if you don't want to use those. But there are options for those, and that's kind of a lot of shortcuts and things like that you can use with the setting up of your course. So setting up a brand new module in Microbuilder, you can simply just start completely from scratch and build everything out yourself, which I'll show the structure shortly. But you can also use this AI assistance to create a module. Essentially, you can prop in a prompt, so some sort of typing, some sort of topic you want to do. Example, there's the fire safety for shipboard personnel. Be as complicated as you want to. I think there is a character limit, though I can't see it displayed there, and it usually wants it to be a certain length before it'll actually take it on as a topic or a prompt. On top of that, you can also add in source documents as well. So if you want it to draw information from something that's a source document, whether it's a text file, a Word doc, PDF, even PowerPoint, it can use that to draw the information to build out this course, rather than it just using sort of the machine learning side of things. And very, very important to note that ELB have a huge focus on security and privacy with AI as well. Anything AI based, no matter what engine they're using. So they've got audio, video, as well as text based, and they all use different things that they're built on in the back end, but none of them actually pull the data back in to teach the model itself. So all your data is safe. It's not teaching them any secrets or anything. So we've got all the sort of documentation you need on that, and something very important to sort of point that through, which is a big point for ELB, that they do that specifically. So I won't go through this sort of new course progress here. I'll jump back to one I've already got. Let's jump into an online safety one. Okay, bring that up here. just change the theme to start with, and I'll show you quickly. So MicroBuilder is that sort of scrolling down style setup. You can add different blocks of information and blocks of content as you go through. It starts off with a big heading and a subline. That's the main start of every course. It'll always have that bit at the start. And then from there, you can add new blocks of content. If we use that AI tool, it would set up the, based on your prompt, it would just simply do headings and paragraphs to build out that content. And from there, you can build the rest and obviously edit what's there as well. Adding any block into MicroBuilder is as simple as clicking our little plus there in between, selecting where you want it to go. And then you can add things like, again, a header, so bold text there, a paragraph if you want. You can also use some of these AI tools to do text-based items, so you can have it write an analogy based on a prompt, a scenario, a set of steps. You can also do a question set at the end, which will actually draw from whatever information is currently in the course. So whatever you've currently built, what's there, even if the AI did it in the first place, you can then have a question set written up, which will give you 5 questions based on that information as well. With the question set, you can continue to add more questions, so you can do it again and get another 5. I think we've sort of seen occasionally it'll repeat a question when you do that, but you can keep going till you get as many as you want. And obviously you go through and check and edit them as well. Any AI stuff you want to sort of obviously double check over, but it gets you away from that blank screen and actually looking at something to edit. It's often easier to edit stuff than to write it in the first place with things like that as well. As far as media goes, you can add all sorts of things. So there's image, audio, video options. The image options, you can basically upload your own from your file. You can use your webcam if you want to. You can also access the asset library, which is the ELB 160 plus million assets that if you've got a license of anything with us, you should have access to that already. And that's just directly within here with MicroBuilder, and it'll pop up as a little pop-up there for you to search and grab whatever you want and place it into the screen as well. So they've got all their categories and their search function, which is pretty handy. Outside of that, if you are adding audio, you can pop this open here. Again, you've got the choice to upload your own if you've got files handy. You can record it on the fly if you're really brave and think you can get it covered in one go, or take as many takes as you want. There's also text to speech, which is again using some AI tools there as well. So this one's built off 11 Labs. We pop this open, you essentially pop some text in here, which let me just grab this as an example. Pop some text in here. It'll detect the language, so you can do multi-language stuff there as well. And you can select a voice based on this. They've got all sorts of different voices, accents, different types of talking. I usually scroll down to Charlie, which is our one of the Aussie ones. There's a few others there as well. You can then also fiddle with some other settings like expressiveness, speaking rate, all that sort of stuff as well. Outside of that, you can just generate the audio. Based on how long that is, it'll take a second to run that through, and then you can listen and test it out.
An essential guide for small business owners to ensure their online presence and data are secure from cyber threats.
Okay, so they sound pretty good. It's very easy to edit that, change it, or do it again. So it's much easier than sort of, going back to the booth or sending Michael back into the booth to do it again. It's a bit easier. Bad news for Michael, but it's good and it's pretty quick and easy. If you've got different types of voices and things like that, you can fiddle with as well. So you can save that and it'll become an audio block that sits in there for you as well. So that sits there. It will automatically create captions for you as well based on that, because obviously you put the transcript in, so it can pull that text out for you. There's other settings there they can play with the speed and just the general sort of audio-based stuff. On top of that, which I've got an example here, I'll show quickly. I'll just pop this back open. You can also create what's called an avatar video. So these videos are essentially you select a character you want to use, which is I've got to do a count of this at some point. I always say there's a ton, but I don't know how many there actually are. But there is a ton. There's heaps of them. Let's scroll all the way down the bottom and find some new ones I haven't seen yet. Give that a second to pop through. I might have gone too far. Yeah, we'll grab someone from here. Pop that in. Then you select a background, either selecting an option from some presets here or uploading your own background image. So you can obviously tailor it to whatever you're doing. And it's essentially a talking head on a background style video. Right at the end as well, you can also choose just a plain white background or also blue and green screen, which is if you're using the AI toolkit, which is our separate sort of tool, you can download these as MP4s if you want. So important to note, if you do it directly in microbuilder here, you can't download it and pull it out. So it may be often better to do that directly in the AI toolkit, which is just a separate tool on our studio page, which if you've got this, you've got that. So it's always there. Let's just do a white background on this one. And again, you pop in some text. I'll just grab that same text there. It'll do the same voice thing. You can select a voice you want to use. Let's go someone random. Oh, there's Will. Let's see what Will sounds like. Haven't heard him before. And you can generate the audio. Try and guess what accent Will's going to have.
An essential guide for small business owners to ensure their online presence and data are secure from cyber threats.
Yeah, I think I'll stick to Charlie, I think. Some of them sound a little bit more like that than others, but anyway, there's tons of voices you can play with. And that's the same sort of setup as what we just did. Once you're done with that, you can skip through here and then you can actually view the preview of them speaking it. So it's not just the voiceover, it is actually the sort of little character moving and talking. They look really good. And you can reuse those for a lot of things like little intro clips or something like that if you want. And essentially it generates that video. It takes a second to run through. So here's one I prepared earlier, which I've just lost. Here he is.
An essential guide for small business owners to ensure their online presence and data are secure from cyber threats.
Okay, so you can see them sort of talking. It does look quite real, and there's tons of different characters there as well to play with. So really good for those sort of quick little videos. If you've got other video-based content, again, you can obviously pop this open here, upload your own, film your own if you want to do just a quick sort of intro video. You can also embed directly YouTube or Vimeo into these as well. So that's all sort of embedded there for you, depending on what you want to do. Outside of that, any of our other tools, if you've got access to them. So for example, our training arcade, which has little short games you can create as activities or quizzes. Also our VR tool, which can create little VR activities or really big extensive VR activities. They can be added as a block within here as well, and they work directly from your screen. So any microbuilder content works on phones and tablets as well. So then likewise, anything you pop open from there will work the same way. So if you've got our VR tool, you can add that in. If you've got a game, you can add it in. If you've got something in anything else that is in an HTML format, you can embed that as well using this option here, which has got a lot of different ways of doing it. So you can do a link directly to something. If you've got a file or a zip package, you can upload that yourself as well. You can also just do HTML blocks to add any other kind of interaction you want within the tool as well, which just lets you do a bit of a script in there for the people who play with that sort of stuff as well. One thing we sort of have seen happen, or people sort of talked about doing, is if you've built a specific page or a more complex interaction in Lectora, you can publish that as a single page HTML and embed that here. So essentially get the power of Lectora just popped into your microbuilder as well, which is really handy for that sort of thing, depending on what you're setting up there as well. So tons of stuff you can play around with those as we go through here. Last little thing on some AI stuff, I'll get rid of all these videos and seahorses. Any bit of text that you've got in here as well, it's already there, whether you wrote it or the AI put it in for you. It'll have this little sparkle symbol, which is our little sort of AI tag there, which you can then use that to either elaborate on what's there, simplify what you're seeing, or you can also convert it into analogy, question, scenario, step by step. All those other text-based ones we saw before are based on this text as the prompt itself. So that's really handy for just sort of manipulating what's there, even if you play around with it back and forth to get something you like, and then jump in and edit it and figure it out as well, depending on what you want to do. So yeah, really handy with that sort of stuff as you pop through there as well. That's kind of all the content you can add. Questions, I mentioned the AI question set. You can add your own manual questions as well. They do only have sort of quite basic ones, so multiple choice, you've got multiple select and short answer questions, and you can add them as many as you want wherever you want them to be. Any of these blocks that we build, we can move up and down as well if you want to put them somewhere else pretty quickly, easily move things around as you go through. Now, appearance wise, what we've been looking at is all pretty sort of just plain white text or plain black text on white background. The appearance of this course is controlled over on the right hand side in our theme, which you've got a bunch of built-in ones you can click through. Some of them are pretty cool, but maybe a little bit too in your face, depending on what you would like and what your fonts you like as well. If you want to create your own, you can create a custom one as well, which we did do one here for as a Suncorp sort of demo, pretty recognized colors. And you can pick your own fonts and colors and all that sort of stuff as well as you go through. And you can make as many of those custom themes as you want if you've got different sort of styles for different types of learning. The main thing is just getting this done really quickly as well. And you can create those themes really easily and really quickly. On On top of that, as you go through your module, if you've got quizzes or questions in there, you can play around with the layout. You can play around with the feedback as well. Likewise, for completion, it has a little sort of completion wheel that goes through. The default will just be to complete that as you scroll down. So when you get to the bottom, it's completed essentially. But you can make it so that if you have videos, they have to have watched them, and if you have questions, they have to have answered them. So essentially, you can control that sort of completion a little bit more with that as well. So quick and easy stuff for that completion as well, depending on what you're doing. Lastly as well, you can see a bunch of languages here. There is very powerful translation capabilities with this tool. If I go to translate this, I can go edit and pick one of these. I'll do a count on this one day as well. Tons of languages that they have. If you want this in Spanish, I don't think I've got Spanish on this one yet. You can select Spanish there. Each of these languages also have a little icon dictating what it's actually going to translate for you. So by default, everything text will translate. So text and captions for everything will translate for you. Any language that also has a little VO option there will translate the audio for your AI audio stuff, as well as the avatar videos as well. I have to confirm if it'll do that for your own videos, but I imagine probably mainly for the AI ones. It also then decides if it's got a male or female voice for that option. So some of them only have one or the other, and that just gives you that option when you're translating. So let's get this into Spanish. Translate now. It's going to go through and translate all 6 of those languages just to update anything I've changed in the course, because I fiddled with some other stuff, and they're all done. So whenever I'm doing a course here, I can then pop this open and read the course in Tagalog or German, Japanese. It'll change all of those accordingly, and that's going to be visible for anyone doing the course as well. So again, captions will change. I don't think I had the captions set up on that one, but basically it'll translate that for you really quickly, really easy. Later on, if you make any changes to it, you can just hit translate again, and it'll just update those for you accordingly. Okay, so that's the translation stuff. Finally there, when you publish it out, it creates what's called a SCORM wrapper. So it's a small little file that goes up into the LMS, and everything you've worked on here, when you publish it, it sits in the LMS through that little link. And then if you make changes here, you can just republish and it updates that. Now they are working on having an option to just do a standalone SCORM as well, which we're sort of waiting on. It's meant to be this month, I think. We'll be letting everyone know when that comes out. I always like to just do a quick check if it's in there yet, just in case. I'll publish that as it goes through. But at the moment, the only option is that sort of linked SCORM, which is really handy if you're having to sort of do updates, not wanting to republish, re-download, re-upload, go through your whole LMS process, all that sort of stuff as well. Likewise, if you have your course in various places, you may have it uploaded in 3 different places. That's, again, compounding that time. So if you've got it published to a SCORM wrapper in 3 different places, you can just again update that once and it'll update all of them, which is really handy. Let me see. Download, still only SCORM. You can also publish and download a PDF of your course. So obviously videos and anything like that won't come through, but really quickly for a text-based option or even just a backup of what you've put together, you can pull out a PDF there as well. And if you do happen to use that SCORM link, when you are making changes later on, you can do a side-by-side where it'll compare the current live version with what you're editing, and you can basically see what changes you're making. But that's kind of it. There's a lot there, but also not a lot. And it's very quick and rapid, and great for all sorts of stuff as well. So a question there. Juliana?
Hey, Will. Yeah, thank you. That was such a great walkthrough. I'm quite excited to get up to micro builders when it does release for us. Super quick question. You know how you mentioned you can actually download a copy of the course as a PDF? One of the things we actually often get asked is downloading any assessment-based courses that we do, but one thing we've noticed is it doesn't actually copy across the answers. So just wondering with this new tool whether it would do something similar? Is there a way to
I haven't seen exactly what it does with the answers and especially with the feedback as well. It's basically sort of the information that's up front to you and not the interactive side of things is what it pulls out. But we definitely have a look so I know the answer and I can let you guys know. Essentially, I think it's just meant to be sort of, like a text-based backup, but very interesting to see what it would do with obviously fully interactive stuff, but as well as things like questions and feedback. I'll double check and let you know.
Yeah, loving the AI stuff. Absolutely loving it.
Heaps of good stuff in there. I think everyone's worried about AI, but I think using it as something to help you with stuff is good. It's not going to replace you. Using it completely instead of you doing stuff, I don't think is the way to go. But I think helping you do some things that are a bit hard to get through, or at least get you started, is the good thing as well. Hopefully that's helped everyone sort of get a bit of an idea of what's there. Hopefully what's coming, we'll obviously share any sort of updates and things like that from MicroBuilder as they come out. So particularly, things like that SCORM option and some other options they've been playing around with. So
I'll jump in there. So if anyone has seen, which I know some have, the article on the ELB MicroBuilder updates page about the collaboration side of it. To give you an update on that, the marketing team jumped the gun with promoting something that's not coming out this month, but is scheduled for mid to late next month. So for those who saw that,
but that'll be handy. At least if they put out a marketing thing, we know that it's pretty much on the way, which is good. But that'll be a collaborative option, so you can have multiple people working in and shared MicroBuilder courses. So at the moment, they're just standalone in there, and what you've built is what you've built. But that's something we're looking forward to with the collaboration side of things.
So you'll demonstrate that next month?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We're always there. Lectora support sessions plus what's new in MicroBuilder, I think, is what we're doing with these. We might start doing a separate one just for MicroBuilder, but we'll see how we go.
Well, I think also we might move into showing just the training arcade trivia game, the one game, because it seems to be part of the packages now as things are rolling out. So we'll show the best way of utilizing it, because you don't have to just embed the game in an authoring tool. It can SCORM out by itself. You could use it as a pre-test or after-test to any face-to-face training. So we might start sort of bolting that in as well, so people know how to utilize it.
Good for pointing out those. And as always, any of the support-based stuff, any questions people have or any issues they've been having, do let us know. Even if you just send it to me or support, or reply back to the invite to this whenever you get one and say, hey, I want to look at something about this. We're always looking for ideas for new topics. We'll come up with stuff ourselves if you don't want to send anything. But anything that people are commonly having issues with or happy to see more of is obviously what we're looking at. So these sessions are for you, and we want to answer people's questions and help everyone out with that sort of stuff. So thanks again for coming. I'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. Bye now.
Thanks, guys.